All right, an overview of Kingdom Fungi. It says Fungi Part 1. We'll catch Part 2 after Test 3. And so, this is Rhizopus, commonly known as what? Bread mold. And here we have Rhizopus again and again. And so the term for these threads is what? Hyphae, that's right. And when you have a web of threads, that's called a what? A mycelium. And what is one of these round structures called? A sporangium, that's right. What are these little guys inside it? Spores, that is correct. Do these spores function in sexual or asexual reproduction? Asexual, that is correct. Here's the diagram from the book that shows asexual reproduction. The spores eventually being distributed, floating in the breezes as the sporangium cracks open. Spores float away in the breezes, they land, they germinate simply by mitosis, in this case mitosis without cytokinesis. Here we have sexual reproduction beginning here, and we don't have to know in great detail, except I might ask you to come up with this little sequence along in here. And so what is happening? We have the mycelium growing toward each other, forming a connection. In that connection, they're sealed off a cell on each side. These cells are called what? Gametangia. What does that mean? Gamete enclosure, gamete covering. And so there's a gamete. Are they egg cells and sperm cells? No, a little bit simple. Here in Kingdom Fungi, they would call them a plus gamete and a minus gamete, like there's a plus mycelium and a minus mycelium. But there is fertilization. Those two cells do unite, forming a zygote. And so what happens to that zygote? In all zygotes in Kingdom Fungi, when there are zygotes, meiosis. Is there ever mitosis of zygotes in Kingdom Fungi? Never, never, never. No mitosis of two-end cells in Kingdom Fungi whatsoever. And so here we have one of the sporangia. The sporangium is cracking open. What are all these spores? They'll be disseminated. And this again is sexual or asexual reproduction. It is asexual. What is this? Ooh, this is sexual reproduction. We see, we're going to call this a what? A zygote. Before a zygote, there were what? Gametangia on both sides of this juncture. And we're going to call that a zygote. Here's one up close and personal. If I ask the chromosome number of the cell inside this structure, you tell me it's what? It is what? 2N, yes. And here we have caught in the act. We have two gametes. Which one's the egg, which one's the sperm? Can't possibly tell. We say one's the plus, one's the minus. This is just prior to what activity? Fertilization. Here they are up close and personal. We moved to a different type of fungus now. We were just looking at Rhizopus before. What is this? This is penicillium. This is penicillium. And what do the spore-producing structures look like in penicillium? They are not sporangia. There's another term that I'm not going to bother you with, but they look like little hands with fingers. What are each of these little round things forming the so-called fingers? They are spores. And what will the spores do? They will float off in the breezes. Is this sexual or asexual reproduction? Yes, once again, asexual. Has penicillium ever been observed having sexual reproduction? No, it has never been observed, so it is put in the group called the deuteromycetes, or imperfect fungi. Yes, indeed. Well, now we move on to another group of fungi, the kind that produce mushrooms. And what kind of fungus is that? What's the general category? That's right, the basidiomycetes. The basidiomycetes, yes. And so we see pores or possibly gills underneath these reproductive structures. And so this is a little microscope slide. This will be part of your next lab test. This is a slice through the cap of a very, very tiny mushroom and through the cap. And so what are these long structures? They are the what? The gills. We move across. What is this round structure in the middle? We called it the what? The stalk. We move on across like that. We're looking up close and personal. Of course, you need to know the basidiomycete life cycle, know exactly what's going on along these gills. And of course, these little round things are what? Spores. And And so we have here a what? A fairy ring formed by the growth of a mycelium, bigger and bigger. It started off in the middle, and the mycelium kind of dies out in the middle, gets bigger around the outside, and so this circle of mushrooms gets bigger and bigger. But our basidiomycete life cycle, you have a pen cast on that. You'll be responsible for that on the test. Here's the book's version. Unfortunately, you got to come up with Professor Veazey's version. And again, it involves these gills. And what are these things called? It says basidium. That's Latin for what? Club. So we have a so-called club here with 4 spores attached. At least there were at one point 4 spores attached to each club on these gills. What was this? A spore count formed by bazillions of spores of one mushroom with gills. Bazillions of spores produced. How is this produced? A cap was taken off a mushroom, laid on a white piece of paper, left there for quite a few days till the spores dropped off onto the white paper. The mushroom cap was very carefully removed, and here you see the result, formed by bazillions upon bazillions of little tiny spores of this basidiomycete, this mushroom. All right, now we're on to the what? Not the basidiomycetes, but the what? The ascomycetes, which often form these cup-shaped structures. And where is the reproductive action? Along the inside of the cup. Yes, it is. And so we see here along the inside of one of these cups a bunch of what's? Well, ascomycetes. What's asco mean? It means sac. And so here we are. We see the sacs coming closer and closer and closer. And so these are long, narrow sacs. At maturity, how many spores inside each sac? Yes, indeed, 8 spores in each sac. The first 4 were formed by what? Meiosis, and then the second, that number was doubled by what? Mitosis of each of the original spores to form 8 spores per sac. Here's the life cycle. You'll also have that life cycle, the Professor Veazey version. You'll be responsible for that on the next test. Last but not least, yeast. Here we have asexual reproduction in yeast. Yeast are how many cells big? 1 cell big. This is simply asexual reproduction. The common term for that is budding. It's actually a form of what type of cell division? Mitosis. That's correct. And here it is right here as well. I don't have a slide on the sexual reproductive cycle of yeast, but you could possibly be asked for that on your next test. Well, that's it. That's our little whistle-stop tour of the subjects we looked at in Kingdom Fungi. All right, bye-bye.